Hey there, I'm Chris Crowell, Editor-in-Chief of Solar Builder magazine. The big, beautiful bill is signed, as is the death warrant for the residential solar tax credit. Today on Power Forward, we'll be discussing what solar installers need to do next with David Dunlap, VP of Product Strategy with BayWa RE. Hey, David, how you doing today?
Hey, Chris, I'm good. Good to see you.
Well, thanks for taking the time as always. So we know the 30% tax credit, 25D, will be gone at the end of the year. So now we also know there will be a mad dash to make sales and get installations done before the December 31st deadline. I want to start thinking about that year-end push to start our conversation. As someone who's always thinking about product strategy, should I be worried about this rush of projects and how it will impact supply or my purchasing strategy or anything like that?
It's a great question, and I think the right place to start. But let's first make sure that we're clear that the 25D tax credit is the homeowner personal investment tax credit that they take on their personal income, and for that reason impacts the cash and loan portion of residential solar. The lease portion of the market is handled under 48E, and that obviously doesn't expire. There's some changes in the ramp down, but when we're talking about the cash and loan, there are fewer strings attached to those tax credit dollars, and the cash and loan portion of the industry is not 100% of the volume, obviously. And because there are fewer strings attached, basically the supply is across all available imported and domestic equipment, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the important way to sort of frame this and think about it is, which lane are you in as a business? What supply are you sort of aligned to in your business strategy? I mean, yes, supply constraint potentially could be an issue if you're going after product that is in limited supply or in high demand across those other funding streams. I guess my point being, if you have not been selling domestic content product because you're not selling a domestic content lease and you haven't pitched that value to your homeowner, now's not the time to switch over and say, suddenly, I want to sell you this domestic, because that is going to be way more constrained. It's challenging to say we're going to encounter a mad rush and supply will be constrained. Yes, we will see evidence of constraint, but in specific lanes and specific product categories. So understanding where your business fits and which products you're aligned to, and asking the questions of your distributor or your partners, do I have challenges here? Is there a pivot I can make that's not in constraint that I should be aligning to for the rest of the year? I think that's the conversation to have.
When we do get to the end of the year, do we know what has to be done to qualify a project for the tax credit kind of at the buzzer? I know there's no safe harbor for payment for a project to be done after December 31st. And it sounds like a project installation must be completed, but that maybe PTO isn't required. I don't know if all that sounds right, or if you want to clarify kind of what constitutes a project.
Yeah, the final language was attempted to be more clear, and it sort of has to do with expenditures made, and the intention is clearly that project work is completed. I think what we're struggling over is the exact definition to hang a date on. When you say the project is completed, does that mean that it's glass on rack, or does that mean that you have actually energized and got your permission to operate? The way I'm thinking about this, Chris, is let's just be practical. If you as a homeowner are buying a solar system from your local contractor, when do you want to pay them in full for that project? It's probably not in your best interest to pay 100% down and have them put some mounts on your roof and then say, I'll come back at the end of 2026 and finish your project. So even if there were some workarounds for substantially starting the project, or some threshold for project completion, all the material is on site, and I gave you a final invoice, as a homeowner, would you want to do that? How much trust do you have? How much leverage do you have to get that contractor to come back and finish? As a contractor, what obligations are you setting yourself up for? Do you really want to take all that money ahead of time and then have a backlog of work to complete with no future draws, payments into your business, right? So there's a There's a level of honesty, integrity, and sophistication that the business needs to operate under that says, I know I collected that money in advance of work being done, and I'm not going to spend it somewhere else in my business. I'm going to hold on to it and use it for that completion. So I think my advice is make sure that you don't oversell your installation capacity. If you're promising the homeowner access to that funds, you're not ultimately responsible to the IRS, but you're responsible to the homeowner because you represented that they can file for that tax credit. So you need to be able to give them the evidence that they can above board legally add that to their tax year 2025 filing.
So that was, the first part of the discussion, just kind of, I guess, preparing for 25D to be gone at the end of the year. But that's not the most interesting part of this discussion to me. The tax credit for homeowners will be gone, and that's going to fundamentally change the value proposition for the cash loan business model. And I don't want to, speculate on how much maybe the market might be down or how much business will be lost. It's not really what our thing is, but for installers that have kind of relied on the tax credit to make up a compelling part of the sales pitch, they should be a little bit worried, and they might need to make changes to their status quo in some way to kind of overcome this change. And so my question, to just start this broadly, what should I be doing now if I'm a cash loan, mostly solar installer, to kind of strategize for what comes next in 2026?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think this is a conversation we should be having collectively as an industry. I think anybody that believes that the 30% tax credit was the only reason that we were successfully selling solar is deluding themselves. I think we have to confront that truth and say it made the economic ROI, the return on investment, the payback quicker, but you still were showing the homeowner what the total installed cost of the system is because you have to charge that. And then they were recouping it from the government. There are still state incentives that are in place. Some states have 10%. That's still available. That helps with that payback. But your fundamental selling value prop is actually still the same, but you may need to approach it a little differently and not overemphasize the credit as a discount or as a lower investment cost, and instead focus on what problem are you solving and what value are you creating for your homeowner. So I think the real opportunity here for local contractors is to get back in the business of creating value for their customer, instead of believing that my job is to shoehorn you into signing a contract with the lowest number of years payback period or the lowest monthly payment amount. I mean, even saying, the value of the project is to eliminate your utility bill, that might still be true, right? Regardless of the tax credit. But I think it behooves every business owner to think about, where have you had the best homeowner experience? Where have you created the most value sitting at the kitchen table and talking about the investment in solar? The reasons to invest in solar are still 100% valid, right? You take control of your energy security, your energy future. You're locking in your production of electricity for the next 30, 40 years. You could be installing backup capability and storage for on-site consumption. That's sort of maximizing the value of the electrons you're generating for your own consumption. So in sort of anti or non-net metering locations, that's a huge value add. You're creating that grid resiliency. Many people do not attach a hard ROI or a dollar value on those kinds of things. Those tend to be more emotional or security driven.
So considering the fact that there might be possibly a lower sales volume going forward as a possibility, or maybe for some where it was kind of like a nice, oh, okay, I get this 30% tax credit, and maybe it did lessen maybe some of the sticker shock. Is there anything else you would maybe recommend in terms of asking questions for right sizing the core business, or maybe changing product mix, or something to reduce soft costs, or something to lessen that sticker shock price, at least somewhat more than maybe I didn't care as much about it when I kind of had that ITC to show them, hey, you're getting this extra deal at the end?
The short answer is yes. There definitely are some other approaches, other ways to think about this. And again, I think it's kind of core values of the business and what do you believe your mission for the homeowner value creation is when you're talking about investing in solar, and trying to just do enough discovery with them to align your offer to what they value, right? And so it's not going to be the same cookie cutter solution for every single homeowner you talk to. I think that's something that we kind of lost sight of in the boom when we had, just this wave of door knockers that had a singular value prop: eliminate your utility bill, no money down, sign here. We basically just flooded the market until we got enough people to sign up for that one thing, and maybe even with not so transparent or honest business practices, right? So as an industry, we need to address that. We need to fix it. We should not be paying exorbitant commissions for that kind of sales behavior. So we can address soft costs. We can address the overall equipment cost stack if we understand what the goal is. And if the goal is a shorter rate of return on that investment, if we care about truth in lending and disclosure, some states have started to mandate that. I think that's a good thing for our industry. And then, as an individual business, you need to think through your experience, your vast experience of years of selling solar. What are the main opportunities that you have, or the main value props for different kinds of customers, and what solutions do you have? To your point, maybe it's a slightly modified line card for cash and loan versus lease. So I offer multiple funding opportunities, and I offer multiple product offerings that are tailored to the best opportunity within those different streams. But I know not every customer is a lease customer, or I know not every customer has cash. And I think what we're going to see in the pricing in the market is, if you're accessing federal funds, you've got a much higher bar, not only to qualify for those funds, but to procure the equipment and everything that goes with it. So you've got this higher cost of acquisition, cost of equipment, and threshold of FIAC and other requirements in order to utilize those federal dollars that bring that total invested cost down. Or you can avoid it altogether and buy over here, where it can just be imported supply. Right? It can be just the cheapest cost of equipment deployed. And you mentioned it, right? Reducing soft cost and getting the overall cost stack down.
I kind of intentionally avoided the whole FIAC foreign entities conversation for today, because there's still many ways that could go and things to be figured out by lawyers and all sorts of people. And
I think we have to be aware that the model of just blow and go selling solar only, we're past those days. The value prop now is building energy independence or energy utilization. So start with energy management, start with storage, start with self-consumption, do an energy audit in the home. These are all services that you can sell to a homeowner, and they can be a point of entry as a first stage for repeat business. Maybe now is the time to stand up a service department for repowering and for O&M, because there's a lot of orphan systems in your community because they were sold 15 years ago and the business that originally sold is out of business.
So two things. One, good shout out to the repowering edition of Power Forward that we did in our previous episode. If you all missed that, be sure to go check that out and understand maybe some of the questions to be asking about how to really start considering more repowering jobs and service opportunities as part of your line of business. Two, I did wonder, we because we discussed in previous episodes expanding into, EV charger installations and some of these other home electrification items. But, the EV tax credit is going away too. There's a lot of incentives that are kind of also going away. And if things are just getting more expensive across the board, I'm wondering how you think that impacts the push for diversification as a strategy for solar installers. Is the tone of the country in this bill and everything like maybe pushing back against where we thought things were headed?
Definitely. And look, there's no question that it takes the wind out of your sails when you have backing from the federal government to incentivize and encourage growth and adoption. And we're going to make this more lucrative for you as a business. We're going to make it more attractive for a customer to say yes. But let's face it, those are policy choices and incentives to try and get you over the hump of that decision process. But it doesn't mean that fundamentally the core value was wrong. People weren't buying electric vehicles because of the $7,500 rebate, right? That was a help, while the cost of an electric vehicle is still a little higher than an ICE vehicle. But there's other reasons besides pure economics that we as consumers make our buying choices. So when it comes to this, the solar contractor, I think, as we've been saying for years now, think of yourself as an electrification contractor, and you're providing energy management, energy future control and ownership to your consumer, to your customer. What are all the ways that they might want to do that? I've never advocated that we want to do all of these things at once and sort of blow up your business, but what makes sense to do? I've had installers tell me that they don't offer EV chargers because as a standalone line item, they can't make money on it. I get that. And that's probably true. It's less than $1,000, and it doesn't on its own justify the crew to go out there and add a circuit and put in a plug and mount the EV charger. But doing it as an add-on to the solar job that you're already doing, and you're already in there in the main breaker panel, it doesn't cost you anything extra, right? Maybe $50 for an extra breaker, and maybe another $50 for the outlet, and the labor is literally an extra 10 minutes. That's the time to do it. So figuring out that where it fits into your business is as important as the decision to entertain some of these diversification options. Time and time again, I hear people say the most valuable experience they've had with local contractors is when they anticipate what work you need next, right? So you establish rapport, you build trust, and then now when I need this new thing, I know who to call, and I'm going to ask you to come back and do that.
I'm curious if you think that maybe more residential focused installers should be really thinking about moving into the commercial space more, because we know rates are going to be going up, and the tax credit will still be accessible for commercial jobs. And it just makes me think that there's going to be more of a kind of compelling pitch in the commercial space over the next however many years, and that maybe just trying to get ahead of the curve and try to build up a commercial line of business could be maybe a good move.
Absolutely. I think the challenge there has been the residential installers were either nervous or felt ill-equipped to compete in the commercial space, or just lack of experience. But yeah, the runway to still leverage some tax credit dollars and make the economics more attractive is there in the commercial space. Really, the fundamental difference between the commercial and the residential is that separation of pure economic argument versus more of an emotional decision or something. But even the most emotional driven commercial business needs a business justification, but it doesn't mean that they're devoid of emotion. So they could have a critical loads requirement. They could have an always on requirement that, again, I think the shift we need to make here is we're not just solar power plant generator installers, we're energy management contractors. And I think a lot of businesses, if you take an honest look at their lost revenues when power goes out, or some kind of a grid interruption event, or lack of ability to function, that's your economic argument right there. And for some businesses, it could be a matter of hours, and they've paid for the system. And if you start with battery storage and PV as an option, that's actually a really, really compelling argument to make. But just like the kitchen table conversations, you have to get into the weeds with the decision maker of the business. And that's hard to find. Is it the building owner? Is it the building leasee that owns the business? Do they have rights to install permanent equipment on the building, in the building? It's a longer sales process. And then the electrical componentry is more complicated, but the business case is absolutely there.
When I was looking at the 50 states of solar report on things happening with net metering, it seems like there are more utility incentives being on the table for on-site generation for commercial properties. And just with the rise of data centers, knowing that there's going to be so much more stress on the grid in general, seems like maybe there is just going to be more of an opportunity for mid-market solar and storage from a couple different sources beyond just even thinking about the federal tax credit incentives.
Really well said. I think that's it. It's whether it's an incentivized opportunity coming from the utility or it's a disincentivization based on rate hikes and time of use rate structure. There's pressure from the utilities to seek alternative energy production and energy consumption means. But it's not a cookie cutter. It's not the same solution in every state and every market. But within every state and local market, there are really great solutions that can be had. The federal government incentive dollars that go in, that's just pigeonholing a slice of that incentive. But we've proven to ourselves globally that utility scale solar without any incentives is still cheaper than natural gas and many other forms of electricity generation. So we don't actually need the incentives. It's just really abrupt and hard to think about. We had them today and we won't have them tomorrow. Within that commercial realm, we've got time, we've got a ramp. And in all fairness, when the IRA was passed and we said we have 10 years, nobody was thinking about what's that transition going to be. We just wanted to enjoy the time while we had it. Well, now we've got to start thinking about what is that future.
How do you feel in general about losing the tax credit for homeowners? You know, between the two of us, you're a bit better at finding silver linings than I am in general. and I was just curious if, you know, maybe you can make a case for one here that, you know, this is going to be tough, but maybe it's not a bad thing. Just curious your take on that.
Yeah, it's not great. It definitely, we needed a runway and a ramp down. If we look holistically at what this policy has kind of combined, it's maintaining financial incentives for corporations, for businesses, and taking away the power of choice and the opportunity for support and incentivization from individuals, from people. So it's a disenfranchising, definitely, of the consumer public. It's consolidation of the profits and the opportunities and the wealth within corporations and within the financial entities. And frankly, I think that is bad for our industry. That's really the downside of it. The silver lining, if I get back to, you know, what is this doing for us? I think it's causing us to grow up. It's causing us to grow up a little bit faster than we wanted. But what I think is really happening, even with the retention of 48E specifically for on the storage side, right? You can still access a lease for storage for the next 8 years, 9 years, right? At the full value. We have not done enough to add storage to our existing PV fleet out there in the industry. People are not self-consuming their electrons, and there's a huge opportunity to lean into that, both in the lease model or in a cash and loan model. And again, that funding stream is meant to support consumers where they are. What is your financial reality? What can you afford to do? And have a range of products that suit where you're at, right? So if all you can do is come up with a minimum monthly payment, we need a model that supports that. So there has to be a path to ownership through a prepaid lease or a lease to own model, not exclusively a 20-year lease that you're on the hook for even if you move. If we go back to the fundamentals of off-grid solar design, you start with what is the consumption loads of a building or a family unit in a structure. So that determines how much battery storage we need and our energy management, and then how much PV do we need to keep those batteries fed. That's how we should be designing solar and storage, in my opinion. Then net metering doesn't matter as much, right? Policies for paying for electrons created that you're flowing downstream, you're not flowing them downstream. We need to have all of these models because we've seen in Hawaii and California and whatever, even if they used to be in place and they used to be lucrative and there was a business model built around it, that's not necessarily the future path. And I think that's the silver lining to me, is this is going to force us to think about where we're truly creating value, where we're incentivizing both the business owner and the homeowner to align on value creation.
I see your silver lining. I know what you are saying there. And in the end, solar as an industry is going to be fine. It is more of the, I guess, the bummer that you brought up at the beginning is it's just homeowners that lose in the end. That no lobbying power, then yeah, the money just worked its way back up to the top. But that is a good view of what solar installers should be thinking about right now, how the bill could directly be impacting their business. And we'll be talking about this a lot more, going forward on episodes of Power Forward, as the industry is, just forever changing, never a dull moment. And David, thanks for taking the time to stop by Power Forward today.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you.